The first rehearsal began beneath a ceiling gloomier than storm clouds, its paint flaking like stale pastry to reveal blackened beams. Isabelle Maurienne, newly appointed leading soprano of the Théâtre d'Hiver, lifted her chin and tasted the air, a mingling of mildew dust and an undercurrent of something copper-sweet. Ambition overpowered revulsion. She had sung in grander houses, but none carried such legends. If the rumors proved true, a single performance here could raise her name higher than Parisian gaslights. Maestro Fournier rapped his baton. "From the cadenza," he murmured, voice muffled by the velvet rod of the curtain. "Remember, mademoiselle, the encore is obligatory." He spoke of it as though it were written into contract rather than whispered into nightmares. The Théâtre d'Hiver, closed by decree after a fire 30 years earlier, had reopened only because a consortium of bankers needed a novelty for the winter season. The cursed aria, so the playbills trumpeted, would be heard for the first time since the Inferno took the life of Celestine Roux, a soprano whose name lingered in scores but nowhere else. Isabella touched the score waiting on the stand. It bore no composer's name, only the title, Aria di Mezzanotte. The notes swarmed like insects across 5 lines, and at the bottom an encore section bore the sigil of an infinite loop rather than a double bar. When she mentioned this peculiarity to Fournier, he shrugged, eyes downcast. "The house demands it," he said. By twilight, the first rehearsal concluded. The chorus dispersed quickly. Refusing to linger after dusk, Isabella gathered her cloak, yet paused when she noticed a figure in the upper gallery, a woman in charred silk, hands clasped as if still applauding. Smoke made of shadows drifted about her shoulders. When Isabella blinked, the gallery was empty except for a folding seat that creaked back to stillness. "It's only drafts," she chided herself. Still, curiosity gnawed. She slipped backstage, into corridors warped by heat long ago. Roses from some forgotten gala had fossilized along paneling, their petals crisp and colorless. Somewhere deeper, faint music, singular, aching notes, echoed like heartbeat in stone. She followed. The hallway tilted downward, spiraling until it opened upon a door of raw iron. Though it should have been locked, it parted at her touch. A subterranean chamber, half catacomb, lay beyond, its walls carved with names. Adrienne Prou, contralto, 1860. Mathilde Vachon, tenor, 1867. Even voice types seemed reversed, as if mocking identities. Among them, Celestine Roux, soprano, 1872. Fresh scratches beneath read, Encore, 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 growing fainter, until the knife or hand had broken. Isabella retreated, disturbed more by the time signature etched beside each name, a gyrating loop, than by the dates. Breathless, she returned to the stage, where the ghostly afterglow of gas lamps lingered. The curtains swayed, although no draught disturbed it. From within its folds, a hush, like distant applause, sighed. She hurried home. That night, Isabella dreamed of singing before an audience of skeletons clad in opera capes. Each bony face wore the mask of endless adoration, mouths open in mute bravo. She sang the encore again and again, throat bleeding into the score, yet the conductor refused to lower his baton. She awoke with her own voice ringing down the stairwell of her boarding house. Her landlady hammered the wall. "Rest yourself, mademoiselle." Rehearsals deepened. The orchestra pit seemed more abyss than workspace, and the players developed nervous ticks-tapping bows, sharpening reeds to daggers. Between takes, Isabella questioned them about Aria di Mezzanotte. Most shrugged. One violinist muttered, "The notes appeared after the fire. None know who composed them." Another swore an invisible prompter, whispered during rests. A bassoonist quit mid-phrase, absconding with his instrument as if it might mutiny next. On the 4th day, Isabella cornered Maestro Fournier in the score library. "What binds this house?" she demanded. "Why do we never rehearse the final bars?" He rubbed parchment dust between his fingers. "Because there are none," he answered. "The music writes itself the moment you reach the threshold. 45 bars in rehearsal become 400 on stage. It is not I, but the house that turns pages." Superstition. If only. He flicked his eyes over leather spines. Long ago, Celestine Roux tried to finish the aria with a triumphant cadenza of her own. Flames answered her ornamentation. The encore kept her singing while fire hollowed the roof. She never stopped, Isabella. They say her voice shrieked through the smoke until rafters collapsed. Isabella felt a thrill that was not wholly fear. Then, to survive, one must not defy it. One must not attempt to end it. Yet if she could outwit such malevolence, her name would eclipse all. She imagined critics, awestruck, and managers clamoring. The price of risk glittered like jewels in her mind. Opening night arrived beneath a moon clawed by chimneys. The theater bristled with chandeliers, every crystal thrumming like a trapped mosquito. The audience arrived curious, delighted, tourists of doom. They unwrapped chocolates and lorgnettes, unaware their bodies might serve as tomb ornaments by midnight. Isabella inhaled backstage. The air tasted wetter than the Seine. She allowed the dresser to cinch her bodice, each tug forging armor. "You'll astound them," the woman whispered, but her reflection in the mirror paled, as though varnish drained blood from glass. Call came. Overture rolled like thunder. Isabella stepped into the proscenium's bruise-colored light. Voice soared. The first section of the aria unfolded with grim majesty, minor keys spiced with tritone leaps. The audience froze, mesmerized. She reached the cadence preceding the encore. Rest. The conductor's baton hovered. A ragged hush spread, uncanny, as if every lung in the hall had inhaled the same chill. Encore began. 4 bars. 8. 20. Applause erupted mid-phrase, yet did not interfere. Rather, it seemed to push air through her diaphragm, forcing higher tone. Eyes wide, she sang like a marionette. The score on the stand elongated. Staves multiplied. Notes crawled, gestating new variations, impossible arpeggios, glissandi that bent physics. She felt her larynx tear but vibrate anew, healed by malignant wonder. Fournier-mouthed, "Stop!" But the baton still circled, autonomy stolen from his wrist. The orchestra continued, sweat dripping as if each musician fought drowning. Some wept between measures. Suddenly a section of ceiling groaned, releasing plaster dust that settled upon hair and velvet like early snow. The chandelier flickered, casting stroboscopic terror. Still, Isabella sang. She remembered Celestine Roux, engulfed by flame. Panic. Sharpened into will. If others had tried to conclude, perhaps ending was not the only path. What if, instead, she followed the melody down its own throat, to the root of its hunger? She modulated into a whispered pianissimo, letting her breath feather out like dying embers. The aria sensed diminishment and retaliated with a ferocious brass swell. Yet within that roar, Isabella detected a countermelody, thin as spider silk woven inside the harmony. It beckoned downward, toward the catacombs. As chorus resumed its refrain, Isabella pivoted, traversing backstage while still singing. The audience gasped, assuming avant-garde staging. She slipped through scenery, down corridors, her voice echoing ahead like lantern light. The aria followed, tethered to her notes. She reached the iron door. With her free hand she pushed. It shrieked open. Cold greeted her, thick with the scent of wet stone and spent candles. The walls' engraved names seemed to stir under footlights, seeping through cracks above. The encore pulsed in her skull. Encore, encore. But here in the catacomb, the acoustics transformed. The melody's authority weakened, bouncing chaotically off low arches. Isabella sang the counter-melody, note by tentative note, like prying at stitches of a wound. The aria shuddered. She saw it, truly saw it for the first time. an umbral figure coalescing in the center of the chamber, stitched from pentagrams of notation, its body a coil of staffs, its eyes twin fermatas. It had no mouth, yet devoured sound. Celestine Rue's charred gown draped from one of its limbs. Beside her, other costumes fluttered, a baritone's frock coat, a mezzo's coronet. The names on the walls no longer lay still, letters twisted into grimaces. Isabella's breath faltered. The specter reached for her throat, craving its instrument. She altered pitch again, singing not to audience nor demon, but to the broken building itself. She sang of velvet curtains breathing dust, of balconies aching under phantom applause, of the gilded proscenium cracked like a smile. She sang the theater's own death shivers, mirroring them in descending scales. Stone quivered, mortar powder drifted. Above, the orchestra faltered. Light fixtures popped, dropping glass stars into the stalls. The audience stampeded, their screams forming a grotesque counterpoint, but still the aria demanded encore. Notes clawed her windpipe. Isabella collapsed to one knee, vision speckled red. The spectral body loomed, vaster now, filling the vault. In that brink she recalled an annotation she had once studied in medieval plain chant. To negate music one must resolve it to silence, by perfect unison, the mode where no interval exists. She must bring the melody to rest not with a flourish, but by coaxing it into the very quiet it feared. Gathering a final breath, she sang the fundamental pitch, seated throughout the arie de Maisonat, a low, solemn D. She held it, unwavering, ignoring the score's labyrinth. The demon howled silent rapture, drawn to the pitch it had scattered but never dwelt within. Anna, a mezzo preserved in memory, whispered from the walls, layering her own D upon Isabella's. Then the tenor Mathilde, for voice types had indeed been swapped by the curse, emerged as faint vibration, one by one. Unseen singers joined, fossil voices freed by unison. The counter-melody dissolved, pages within Isabella's mind curling to ash. The specter convulsed, lines of notation unraveling, turning from staff to filament to nothing. With a thunderless sigh, it imploded, swallowing its encore. Silence flooded the catacomb. Upstairs, chandeliers extinguished. Gaslights winked dead. The public, driven to paralysis mid-panic, sensed a hush so absolute that hearts calmed lest they rupture. Isabella remained kneeling. Her ears rang emptiness. She could taste iron and dust. When she tried to stand, she found the floor had lifted. No, her body had sunk. She touched her chest. Sound vibrated there, but outwardly she made none. She had blown her voice like a candle and taken the flame within. She was mute. A lantern flared behind. Maestro Fournier descended the stairs, face gray with relief and fear. "You have done it," he breathed. "The music is finished." Isabella shook her head and pointed to her throat. His gaze fell. "Ah!" He helped her upward. They climbed. The stage lay in ruin, scenery charred not by flame but by some acoustic tempest. Patrons regained bearings, fled into snowy streets wearing expressions they would never fully decipher. Reporters would later write that a soprano's final note had stunned Paris into winter silence. Days passed. Engineers declared that the Selle cadaver structurally unsalvageable. The city condemned it. Yet rumors persisted. At midnight, through boards nailed over the grand doors, one could hear a single note humming like winter wind. Isabella wandered avenues wrapped in scarf and spectral quiet. Without voice, she communicated in ink, but music haunted her marrow. She feared sleep lest she dream of encores. One evening, beneath the Pont des Arts, she encountered an organ grinder whose monkey danced a dissonant waltz. She pressed coin into the man's glove and turned away, but the organ gave a flourish, a phrase eerily reminiscent of Maisonat. Her pulse pounded. Impossible, the melody was gone. Yet from every alley a busker seemed to tease fragments. A whistle here, a child skipping rhyme there. The aria diffused, seeped into city fabric like thawing frost. She realized with gut-cold certainty, silencing the cathedral had not killed the god. She had merely shattered it into grains, and each grain sought new throats. She needed counsel beyond living memory. So she returned to the condemned theater. Night concealed her trespass. She slipped through boards, across marble tiles veined with cracks. Moonlight from a broken dome revealed the stage now thick with rubble, but the iron door to the undercroft waited, as though no earthquake had touched it. Inside the catacomb, dust smelled of stale sheet music. Names still lined walls, but new space yawned blank, awaiting fresh inscriptions. At the center lay something that had not been there. A shard of mirror, framed by ebony wood. The prompter's box mirror, perhaps, blown below during chaos. Its glass held no reflection, only inky depth. Compelled, Isabella knelt. Soundlessness rang louder than bells within her head, then shaped itself into whisper. It was her own voice resurrected, vibrating inside the mirror. "You entered nothing," it said. "You conduct now." She recoiled, though no sound escaped lips. In the glass, she saw herself garbed in Celestine's burned silk, arms raised as though cueing invisible orchestra. Behind her, the spectral choir of names readied, mouths open. They awaited Encore. Isabella remembered the power that had swelled her throat, seduced her ambition. Even mute, she could still hear it. To refuse would be to live forever haunted, to yield, perhaps, to wield. Hands shaking, she extended fingertips toward the mirror. A chill like stage fog coiled around her skin. She thought of applause bright, devouring, and of how very small mortal legacy felt beside eternity woven from echoes. Above ground, passers-by paused outside boarded doors, swearing they caught strains of rehearsal faint, incomplete. Workers crossing Pont Neuf hummed bars they could not name. A new rumor blossomed. The Hertetivera would reopen under direction of a mysterious maestra, a woman who spoke rarely but conducted with gestures that carved silence into terrible beauty. Inside the catacomb, under the theater's corpse, Isabella stood before her choir of ghosts. She lifted her hand, and though no living ear heard it, the downbeat struck like a heart restarting. Encore began.